Hi, everybody. Today I'd like to re examine a controversial topic in the Axis and Allies world. I want to talk about the maligned and somewhat forgotten Europe edition of the game published by Avalon Hill in 1999. The reason why I'm making this video today is because in a previous video I made about Russian gameplay strategies on a custom AAA version of A&A European map, I feel I misspoke a couple of times in reference to the Legacy board game. First, I said AAA doesn't have a map faithful to the original 1999 game, and it turns out that's not exactly true. If you look under the experimental tab in AAA, there is a playable map of 1999 Europe. It has minimal graphics. It does not model strategic bombing escorts, nor does it have transferable oil IPCs for captured Middle Eastern territories. Other than those minor differences, the map seems faithful to the physical setup. It is important to note that these omissions do not impact the common criticism of the original design. Namely, Russia is supposedly doomed in this game. When I referenced this commonly held belief in my previous video, I feel I was being a bit too dismissive, especially since I gave a shout out to the infamous German tank slam game hack, which I actually don't endorse. In truth, I feel it works slightly more than 50% of the time against inexperienced opponents, and it is less likely to be successful against veteran players, maybe 45 to 50% reliable. The amount of dice rolling that involves unscreened, unsupported armor means it's not a lock either way, especially if you get unlucky, as the Germans on the first round of your moment of truth combat roll. Therefore, in my opinion, it's not a true hack or an infallible strategy. If you don't agree with me, that's okay. About half of you who watch this probably won't agree. But if you go on BGG under the forum section, you can find a fascinating giant long thread on this very topic where people weigh in on either side of the issue. It is very interesting to read through. And in the process of doing this myself, I came upon an entry by a user named Tom Wogan from 2009 that really caught my attention. This post may be found under the thread title Looking to Balance This Game. Wogan says that the tank, well, he basically argues that the tank gambit is really not optimal. If you really want to break the game, try the following. So basically, he outlines a German strategy that wins 100% of the time, not just most of the time. And I've never really tried it before. I'm always interested in stuff like that. So I'm going to use the AAA software on the highest difficulty setting to see if the Wogan plan does sync the AI as it apparently does against every human player. It's interesting because he says it isn't pretty, but it works. Hopefully it's not as mindless and ahistorical and gamey as the more commonly used tank method. And I actually can't wait to see how this plays out. So here we go with invasion of Russia and ultimately the Battle of Moscow, I suppose. So will this be a lightning conquest or a catastrophic defeat? Can Germany kick in the door of Russia and have the whole rotten structure come crashing down as Hitler promised? Let's find out. So here we go with the setup. Wogan argues for a strong push in the Middle East. So with the bonus buys, he argues for a transport and a artillery piece that will be meant to fight in northern Africa, which is different from the standard thing that a lot of German players do. Is, they just buy tanks, and then have a coin flip on the fourth turn, launching Operation Typhoon against Moscow. And like I said, a lot of these supposed hacks, they, in different games, in fact, when someone says, oh, they have like a game hack, usually it just boils down to sort of compressing the action, deciding action into like one huge event. And yeah, I mean, you may as well just flip a coin at the start of the game. It's about as fun and interesting when people decide to play those type of strategies. So I'm going to differ from what Wogan said. He argues for just deploying or launching an attack. Oh no, deploying that stuff in Libya. But I'm going to eventually get there in a roundabout way. I always like to attack and destroy the British fighter in Malta first. So it's going to be Libya by way of Malta for me. Atlantic Ocean. It's always super fun to move the German submarines around for as long as they last. The convoy boxes were a great innovation for this edition of Axis and Allies. And by the way, I have to mention this too. Um, there'll never be a more anticipated game for me than Axis and Allies Europe 1999. Like I remember, this is back when the internet wasn't as good, and you could get sort of enough information that it was coming out, and um, but not so much information. I mean, you might see a couple stories or articles online, a couple grainy images and stuff, but oh, it was just I couldn't wait because you have to remember, like I was old school and got the original in the 80s, and there were unofficial expansions in between the time the original and Europe came out, but they were, I mean, that's pre-internet era. Not a lot of people knew about them. Not a lot of people had them. Certainly, I didn't. I may have seen like one picture online. It was before um, eBay was really a thing too, so they were hard to get unless you were in the right place in the right game store. So uh, Europe was the I like so many people like me just could not wait to get this. I mean, it was just, and I had a friend too who was in the same boat as me, and he actually scooped me, went to the States or something before it was supposed to officially come out, and then we just played on his. He got it before me, and I'll never forget the feeling when you opened the box and you saw the German subs for the first time, like the uh, country specific sculpts, that was new. Modern interpretation of artillery, that was new. Convoy boxes was innovative. Um, and then, of course, once you got playing it, it didn't take long to suspect there were problems with balancing. Um, and then, hence, the popular held belief that the game was broken by using the German tank strategy. Um, I used it a couple of times and lost. Uh, Used it a couple times more and won spectacularly. So um, I guess the big issue was that by using a strategy that was completely brainless, you did have a very good chance of defeating Russia. And that left such a bad taste in people's mouths. And a lot of people just checked out on this game. They just thought, oh, this is broken and it's not worth it and it's fatally flawed and stuff like that. Um, there were times when I also believed this, but I was a lot younger then. So with maturity and experience, I became turned on to mods and just um, rethinking rules, and became comfortable with, yeah, I would just say house rules and adjustments and the whole um, BGG forum and discussion communities that would talk about rules and all upgrades and all that stuff. So anyway, Wogan in his plan uses something that's really common with German players of Axis and Allies, and it made sense to me. And it's just like the whole infantry thing. So you spend all your money instead of on tanks on infantry, and then with change you would buy one artillery, and of course you're going to push that east, by doing this, it's a bit slower, but it gives you much more flexibility and durability instead of um, putting all your eggs in one basket in one gigantic tank army. So this his strategy is more flexible and it makes more sense to me. Um, Although slower, it would seem like you'd be more apt to survive like one or two unlucky combat rolls. Um, but like I said, never really tried this strategy before as Germany, so it's kind of interesting to see what happens. On my first like bonus purchase, I would always buy tanks like everyone else and just drive them east. But um, in this strategy, you can be strong in the Middle East and get those oil credits. I guess the British are very much under strength, and so are the Russians in this setup. To be honest, unfortunately, another thing I want to mention too, with respect to this whole idea that this game is fatally flawed, is to really think about why that is the case. And it seems to be, and I'm not sure if you guys recognize this as well, the entire issue with this game is the victory condition whereby Germany wins if they hold two capitals, so their own, Berlin, and either Moscow or Great Britain. And I've never really seen them take the United States. So basically, all the German player has to do is take Moscow, hold it for one turn, and they win. It says this clearly in the rules on page 2, in multiple spots in the rules, actually. And that is that one word. That one word is the entire problem. And it's so unfortunate that designers of the game didn't recognize this. So if they had just said two capitals, then no one could make the argument that this game is broken because it would require Germany to take and hold Moscow and London or Great Britain. Yes, that lengthens the game by about, I would say it would double the length of the game or maybe even triple it. And that is something that most players wouldn't be interested in. The game length would be too long for 90% of people, but hardcore fans, I don't think would mind. And if you've ever tried to play out Axis and Allies Europe after Russia falls, you discover that you get a compelling game. Actually, it's very difficult for Germany to claw their way back. Usually they do it slowly, first in the Mediterranean theater, and have to push back the Allies in France and maybe in Scandinavia and stuff like that. But the entire time, usually the Allies can muster like a lot of units within striking distance of the Germany territory. So Germany has this sword of Damocles being held over it at all times. And in the meantime, you're trying to, take back the convoy boxes and surround and cut off Great Britain. And you do have the Middle East usually. So it's really interesting to actually play this game beyond the defeat of Russia. It's just that a lot of people just can't get over it, like can't get past how easy it is to defeat Russia, and that's unfortunate. So I argue that the designers could have just changed that one word in the rules, and they would have saved themselves so much online hate and criticism. But that's the way she goes, I guess. there's so many great, fantastic mod ideas online. So I'm gonna have to explore them in a future video. Map upgrades, national advantages, plunder points for Germans, conquest territories, neutrals. So yeah, I really have to do that. And so yeah, I would just say I do like this game. Honestly, I like it better than most people do because I can appreciate that there is something after, if and when Germany is able to take Russia. You're still left with a good game, although a lot of people by that time already have checked out. So that's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate misjudgment made by people who set the victory conditions in the rules. Anyway, so the Germans in this version are building up their infantry and funneling those forces into Army Group North and Center. So, unfortunately, if this was 1941, Army Group South Runstead, I guess, his groups would be kind of shelled out in favor of supporting. Who was it? It was Lee and von Bach, I guess, Center and North. By the way, I'm not that great of an expert on World War II history. Like I know the general deployments and stuff like that, but as far as like getting into the specific units and all that, I really don't know anything more than anyone else would who's watched Battlefield documentaries or World at War and stuff like that. Oh, and I also played Close Combat a lot, so the old Microprose games. So, um, Italy, not distinct in this game, but you can imagine that all the German units in the Mediterranean are represented by them. Um, so making a strong push in Army Group North and Center is ahistorical in its own right, only because the Germans would never let anything Russian, threaten Romania. Because I know that Hitler was super paranoid about being strong enough in Southern Europe to protect his oil resources. So if you're extra strong in around the Baltics or in the center of Russia and sacrifice ground in Southern Europe, at least at the start of Barbarossa, it's not historically accurate. It was just so silly. Um, but in order to win this game, you really have to depart from the historical narrative, I think. Um, yeah, just build infantry, mass infantry, stage them in Poland. There's no preprint marshes in this map that splits the Russian frontier from north to south, which is unfortunate. Just have the Poland in the gigantic Belarusian territory. City circles were also an innovation of Europe, 1999. They weren't big enough. So you had plastic units like spilling all over the place, um, which is another argument for doing these videos using AAA. It's just so much easier to see clearly what's going on. Not saying it's more fun to play on the computer. Of course, it's way better on a physical game board with plastic minis, but from a video perspective, it's not even close. You got to go with the computer if you're trying to explain or test strategies, in my opinion. Um, Unfortunately, too, in '99, which is sad, is the battle for the Atlantic was um, just hopeless. It lasted about 2 turns, and the Germans just have no chance of maintaining that front because the priority is the huge land campaign against the Russians. They can't afford to build any type of ships at all if they hope to eliminate the Russians. Um, Another thing that's really not relevant to history in this is, well, I guess in Wogan's strategy, if you're using this one, his panzers are going to be static until the mass infantry divisions arrive, which didn't happen in real life. They're just sitting in Poland. Um, it's kind of scary too because this gives the US time to establish a foothold on the western part of the map before Germany is really assaulting deep into Russia. Obviously, the tidal wave of men is slower than the tank steamroller strategy. But I think there is something to this. Um, it's going to mean Germany's way more durable and they have more options and flexibility moving. Oh, that was a big mistake, though. I let the Americans take Italy for 1 turn. I'm not playing well here. Par for the course. But if you do the infantry buys, you have greater margins for error. Like you can survive mistakes. So I'll be able to punt the Americans right out of Italy on the next turn. Making real progress in the Middle East. There is something to Wogan's initial build in that theater of operations. It seems to doom the British down there. The Americans arrived in Western Africa, but not in force. I can check their advance. I should be able to beat the landing in northern Italy. It'll be close. Have to use air power over anti-aircraft, which is never advisable. But still have two. I could have 2 infantry there in southern Italy with all the aircraft. That'll be close. I could get unlucky. Well, I should be able to do it. It looks like I have enough units staged in Poland to really initiate the drive into the Soviet Union now, next turn. I'll just go into Eastern Poland finally. Have a problem in Romania. That's really ahistorical. Hitler never would have allowed that to happen. This is sort of another criticism of this game, I guess, the winning strategies, whether it's um, a balanced infantry avalanche or tank steamroller. You're just gonna get things that do not resemble any type of historical chain of events. It's almost like a bull versus matador situation here on the Eastern Front, where the Russians have driven their army into southern Europe to avoid my huge concentration in Poland and to have avoid the bulk of their army getting destroyed. Um, that's something that just looks silly. Uh, but I guess it's just too gamey for a lot of people's tastes. This version of A&A, which is, I maintain, like, it's really unfortunate because it had so much potential and it does have so much going for it. Like, even if you maintain that out of the box, this version of A&A is hopelessly problematic, there's still so much in there to work with if you're into mods and everything. So, and if you recognize that one word in the rules breaks the game, the whole victory point structure. I mean, that's why you use house rules. That's why you uh, experiment. I don't know. At one time, I was very critical of this. I'm not gonna lie. I was just like everyone else. Oh, it's broken. You know. I actually should promote that attitude because then I'd get cheaper copies online. It actually had good map art. Probably the last version of Axis and Allies that had um, map art that I really liked. Uh, I don't know. It's just different. It's weird how with time and perspective your attitude about a game can change. I do. As time went on, I felt so much more um, interested in trying to fix this and adjust it and experiment with it. America doing America things. It's so weird how in Axis and Allies there you just don't see people, AI or most human players, build up right in Great Britain as a springboard for Overlord. It just doesn't happen. Mostly people will always try and get into Scandinavia or stage in West Africa. Kind of a problem if you want something historical. Um, what do you do to fix the problem about Russia always going down? You'd have to give it more units to start. You would have to restrict those units with, instead of national advantages, national disadvantages at the beginning. Like, say that they are very much operationally restricted because of purges and lack of ammo, munition supplies, and everything like that, which was true at the beginning. you would have to maybe restrict these units with movement and have them forced to start like close to Germany and not have them able to retreat for the first turn or something like that. So you would need more units in Russia, but render them ineffective with special rules, at least to start. I think that would be one problem. Because people are going to say, well, if Russia is actually doomed in this game, no matter what, then why even play out the first 6 turns? Like have a setup where you start with on turn one with Russia in German hands, and then you just go after the Western Allies. I mean, who wants to play that? Like that's where you get after you get to that point, turn 6, 7, and 8 with a good player as Germany. But to start that way, a lot of people aren't going to go for that. So that's a problem. Um, but I mean, you still get the good two-front war before Russia falls to a certain extent. This move, driving into Bessarabia, sorry, Belorussia, causes a gigantic dilemma for the Soviet Union player. Um, Certainly, once you have amassed the type of uh, combination of ground forces that I have, uh, you want to fork your opponent, and so they won't know where you're going to go. Is it going to be Moscow, Leningrad, Stalingrad? Moving north of Moscow is smart for the AI to do. It's probably a turn too late. Their push into southern Europe has expired, basically. It's been whittled away, and now they're left with just Red Army, one huge concentration north of Moscow. Most human players would not even do that. They would just make a stand right in the city. It seems like it may not make a difference with the amount of units Germany starts with and how much money they make. As Wogan argues, they can just simply bring so many things to bear on the Russians before the Western Allies can make a meaningful difference in Western Europe. That, I mean, nothing's going to work, and I'm not even playing that well as the Axis. I mean, it had that huge Russian offensive in the south. I lost, the Balkans. Not really expending a lot of brain power here. Just pushing stuff east in big, huge globs. Uh, Keeping enough infantry held back in Germany. Of course, you can do that fairly easily with Wogan's strategy of building tons and tons of infantry. So it's going to be all or nothing into Moscow. It's close. It'll be close, but I have the advantage here because I have air power. You have to take care of your planes, obviously, as the Germans. So, I mean, that's the key to this. If you want to always win as the Germans, sure, you can use the coin flip tank strategy, or you can use this one that looks like it's probably more likely to work and give you more durability and flexibility, provided you take care of all of your planes and never risk them, so that by the time Moscow is threatened, you still have air power left to push into the city. You can see, those reserves they held back in Germany are able to push back into France. Um, Russia's southern expeditionary force, I guess if that's what you want to call it, into the Balkans isn't really going to mean much if they lose Moscow. And in fact, the game will end according to the standard rules of victory conditions after this battle. So, and I don't think saying, some people have argued, well, you have to say all of the cities, Stalingrad, Leningrad, Moscow, all of them have to be taken for Russia to officially lose. Like you could have a rule where you just move the capital. You could build like Moscow, or you could have, yeah, the capital would move to either Leningrad or Stalingrad and put all your units there or something like that. But I don't think that wouldn't work. That's not that fix is. You can see I took Moscow with all of my armored units intact. The infantry were chewed up and destroyed, but still, that's not enough. I mean, for the Russians to hope to make any type of meaningful counterattack, they're done, and this game is over, according to the unmodified standard rules. So yeah, the point is, yeah, Wogan's strategy of using men and artillery instead of tanks is better. So what's broken here? It's that victory condition. That one word in the rules. By having to hold one allied capital as Germany, it should be two. It should be, or you could say something like, if Germany takes eastern United States, they win instantly. Something silly like that. But if you continue to play the game from this point here, even though Russia is destroyed, it's actually a compelling contest. Germany against the two Western allies. It's really difficult and really up in the air. It's not a lock for either side. The problem is most people aren't going to stick around for it, right? They're here for the Great Patriotic War. That's the selling point. That's what people wanted to see, I guess, in this version. And it's been cracked by people. I would say Wogan has sort of the best strategy here that I've seen. I used it, like he said, it wasn't pretty. It was ahistorical, kind of stupid. I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing, yet I still took out the Russians. Does that mean I could continue to play and defeat the Western Allies? It's debatable. Probably not, but it would be compelling. It would be very interesting. And it would mean the game would last 3 times as long. So, for hardcore people, for hardcore fans, there still is something great about this game if you're willing to look past the problem with Russia. I would say, out of the box, that aspect of the game is certainly broken, okay? But it is fixed by changing one word in the rules, the victory conditions, or any number, any plethora of interesting mods and rules adjustments that you can think of that I would like to actually analyze in a future video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more content coming soon.